Well, hello again. I'm back in the workshop. This is video number 9 and you're welcome. I'm going to take this old gearbox apart now and have a look inside. I've also bought a little camera. This thing, clever little device, 4mm in diameter with a little LED or a set of them. And I'm hoping to just stick this into the thing and see how good a diagnostic tool this might be to actually look at some of the gears without taking everything apart. I mean, this offers all sorts of opportunity for exploration, but obviously you have to be very careful that if you stick it in somewhere that you are able to get it out without jamming up and so on. I might even try and stick this down the inlet tract of the Velo at the moment and just check out the inlet valve. That would be interesting. I'd like to just show you one of the first main shafts that I took out of that gearbox many years ago, 30 years ago perhaps, and if I just put it here, you can see there's quite a bit of a banana shape in it. It's bent. Now at the time, of course, I was riding the bike and I didn't know that this was gone, that it was bent. There was no symptoms of such, but clearly this means that not only are the teeth rotating, but the gears are also going in and out. And I found once I had to condemn this, that was easy enough. I replaced it, but I also found that the lay shaft had no bend in it, so it was only the main shaft. Well, it appears to be working now, so let me just have a look and see what happens if I stick it in here. Oh, there's the drain bung, there's the drain hole. There's a gearbox in there. Now let me just see which way that is. That should all be above, so I need to rotate it. Oh, I think it's got oil on it. Right, another go. There's the detent spring, so it's actually showing everything back to front now. No, it isn't. No, that's the right way up. Well, let me try something else. Oh, that's better. Right, I'm going to do something now which I've wanted to do for a while. Let's have a look at the inlet valve. So I'm just going to get this little camera sorted out and then stick this little thing where it shouldn't really be going. Get the orientation right. That's about right, like that. See the slide. Oh, that's upside down. Right. I'm just going to take this cover off now. I've undone all the little Allen screws. little bit like an archaeological dig, really. Oh. Well, that doesn't look too bad. There's no bits down there. Okay, obviously I need to just have a look at this in greater depth, but I think that looks very reassuring. But it's early days. Well, this doesn't look too bad. A little bit of dark sludgy debris down on the micro debris down at the very base of that, but this bearing here is nice and smooth, and everything is looking good. So all in all, nothing really wrong with that. A little bit of slack in these pins. Many years ago I actually made some oversized pins, and I also made oversized selector fork pins, and I case hardened them. So I'll have a little measure on those and compare them to the originals. The whole plan there was simply to take a little bit of slack and tighten things up a little bit on the way the forks interact with the selector plate. I'm just going to take this whole thing apart. It's quite easy to do once you get to this stage. As far as that little camera on a piece of wire is concerned, I think if you had a gearbox that had lost some teeth, it may be possible to stick it in and try and examine the teeth. But to be honest with you, taking this cover off and exposing the gearbox anyway is such an easy job. I don't really know that it was that it's going to achieve very much. I thought it was interesting all the same, and it's always something I wanted to have, so I shall definitely find a use for it. I think examining petrol tanks for corrosion inside might be probably one of the most significant uses. Let me just take these selector shafts out. At this stage now, having had such a mature gearbox, I will do my damnedest to try and get everything to go back as it was. I must say the rate at which this spins and the feel of it, it's completely different to the very tight feel on the other gearbox, despite the fact that when I assembled it all, everything was well lubricated. So this is just a mature gearbox that's thrashed around for, well, I don't know how many millions of revs. And anyway, I'm sure there will be some wear on it somewhere, and it may even be some of the dogs are looking a little bit used. Anyway, time will tell. Well, that doesn't... Oh, hang on a minute. There's some rounded dogs there for going into first gear. Okay, well... Oh, I'll tell you what, why don't I just pull the main shaft out? There you go. I'll check that for straightness in a minute. That means everything can move away, and this whole thing should move out now. There's one selector fork. I think it's the selector forks that's jamming things up. You can see how I haven't done this for a long time. Ah, there you are. Oh, that doesn't look too bad. That'll probably live again. And this is the lay shaft. Gosh, that doesn't look too bad at all. And the sleeve gear. That should come out nicely. Yes, with the oil thrower. There's a little bit of me starting to wonder why on earth did I take this apart. But for all of that, it's good to know how it has travelled through time. All this, I think I made this bush many years ago, so you can see the scrolling. Basically what you do when you're machining the bush out, having set all this up on centre, is you go a couple of thou near the sides, and then you take a good cut, maybe 10 thou, and you just wind the saddle up and out, through and back, and that cuts this scroll pattern, and then you just take the final couple of thou off and clean up any distortions near the steep cut. And I wonder what that feels like. Oh, that feels very good. On the other shaft, which I showed you right at the beginning, that shaft with that was banana shaped, you could actually feel that binding in the sleeve gear. But that feels, well, that feels luxurious. Oh, I shan't. Oh, of course, I'll try. It's early days, but obviously all of this needs to be cleaned of oil, and I'm going to do a little bit of crack testing. That's first gear, neutral, second gear, third gear, fourth gear. Oh, well, big deal, it's all working. That bearing feels nice. This bearing up here feels nice. So far it's looking good, and the only superficiality that I can report is the dogs on first gear are looking a little bit rounded. I just need to see what they're like on the other gear. They don't look too bad. Oh, they're a bit battered there. No, I don't like the look of that. I think I'll have to do something with that. So, I suppose I could put it all back together, but I'm not going to. This is going to be a perfect gearbox. No point in buttoning up stuff that is a little bit ropey. I've just washed this all out with brake cleaner, and I've lubed up this lay shaft bearing again, and I'm not sure if the excuse me, if the microphone on this little camera is going to do justice to this, but this is absolutely silent. If that bearing was pitted or rumbling in any way at all, that sound would travel through the casing into the vise, and the whole bench would be rumbling. So I'm astonished at how quiet that bearing is, and even though they're not very expensive, I'm going to live with that bearing, because every time you put them in and out, you heat up everything. There's a risk of distortion, and then sometimes pushing the bearing in doesn't always go as cleanly as it should do, and there's always a danger of you distressing the bore for the bearing. So that's good enough. I'm going to live with that. And I'm also in the same predicament with the bearing for the sleeve gear. There's absolutely no rumbling or any sounds of distress. I mean, the point is, in all the time I've owned this bike, this gearbox has always had lashings of clean oil in it. Well, as I can see here, even without taking a micrometer to this, you can see the way this selector fork is just working nicely, and the amount of slack in this slot is minimal. There is virtually a little bit of witness there, but virtually no significant wear on this at all, which alarms me. This is pretty functional. I suppose I should be overjoyed at the fact that I haven't found anything dreadful, given the fact that everything was working perfectly before I took it apart. Anyway, that's how those gears, there's a middle position, and then it goes into one or the other gears. I don't know what this one is. Oh, there's a little bit of wear on the edge of that. Oh, look at that. I need to look at these in greater depth. Might be a little bit of wear on the gear flanks. Of course, this could be from some previous rebuild, because when I put this together all those years ago, I was, let's say, we get older and wiser with the passage of time. 30 years ago, what did I know? A lot less than I know now. So I might have said, well, that'll be okay. Anyway, I am older and wiser now, and I shall give this a good seeing to. Yes, and that selector pin is undamaged. The case hardening hasn't given way at all, so I'm quite happy about that. I've just checked the main shaft on the lathe. I won't bother showing you that again. You've seen checking that, but that's got no deviation on it whatsoever. So that is undamaged, unbanana shaped, and I'm quite happy about that. I've got the gearbox components now sitting in an ultrasound bath with a load of brake cleaner, and it seems to be fizzing away nicely. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to do some dye penetrant testing to see about if there's any cracks. So the first thing you have to do is get rid of all the oil out of any cracks, and that's where the brake cleaner comes in. Then you spray the dye penetrant where capillary action gets it drags the dye into the cracks. Then you wipe it all away, and then you put the developer on it. So hopefully something will have a crack in it, so that I can show you. What am I saying? Anyway, when you look at this and you don't see any cracks, you sort of wonder if the thing is working. Anyway, early days. I've just painted this now with the dye penetrant, and I just need to wipe this all off. The paint itself seems to have thinned out a little bit because the surface is quite slippery, but my hope now is that the dye will have soaked into any little cracks, and then I'll be able to develop them and decide where if there are any cracks. This part here is the remains of a lip seal which I doctored to fit into the end of the sleeve gear, and I really must take that off now. It's not doing very much, but on the other hand it helps me identify this shaft, which is the banana shaped shaft, which is very bent, and at the moment that's helping me make sure that I don't consider putting this thing back into the gearbox. So the next stage now, this has been soaking for about 30 minutes. I need to wash all this red dye off and dry it, and then the next stage is use the developer. Alright, this is stage 3. This is where I spray the developer on. Oh look, there's a lot of cracks coming out of that. Wow. Despite scrupulously cleaning this and scrubbing it. In fact, I'm having difficulty believing that there is so much porosity. Extraordinary. Anyway, I'll just let that sit for a minute. This has been scrubbed and wiped to make sure that there is no dye penetrant visible anywhere on it. And you look at that, it's all soaked out of the cracks and crevices. Gosh. Okay, well, this is probably the area where it was bent. And oh look, there's a very, very significant crack there. Gosh, this is working very well. I wonder if you can see all that. Don't know how this thing focuses. Anyway, we'll call that a successfully identified a piece of scrap, as it happens, known scrap, but an interesting verification of this process anyway. This is the main shaft that I've decided to use. More about that later on. This die goes absolutely everywhere, so I've learned the lessons from the first time I used it, which is try and keep it off my hands. Anyway, I'm going to let that set now for half an hour. And a little puff on this perhaps. Right. Well, there's no big deal about washing this stuff off. You just got to deal with it. I've already got caught out with how treacherously sticky this stuff is and how enthusiastic it is for penetrating everything from plastic furniture out in the garden to so it all comes off pretty simply, as you can see. Obviously you have to then wipe and make sure there's nothing in evidence and any of the little cracks. And you don't want to go mad and somehow wash the dye out of any cracks and blemishes. You also have to be sensible about where you're going to worry if you find cracks. There's probably lots of us have got cracked bricks in our houses, but that isn't really a big deal. I'm just going to apply this developer now and see if it draws out any of the red. I'll just let that set. Same for this. I'm happy with that. There's a slight pink tinge to some of the white, but that's in places where I don't worry about a crack. What I was looking for was cracks down at the root of the teeth, and all that's done is draw out some of the pink that went in between the bronze bush and the steel gear. And there's probably a little bit then which went in underneath the oil thrower, which is still in place. So all in all, those gear teeth are looking healthy, and I'm very reassured about that, because don't forget, this gear transmits all of the power all the time from the engine. The clutch goes on here, the chain to the sprocket on the crank. This is always turning when the clutch is engaged, and look at that, white everywhere. I'm happy with that. Now let's have a look at this. Probably a little bit of dye remained in the trench, the splines, but when I compare that to the other shaft, this is well, this is the one I'm going to use. I'm happy with that. Yes, that's a success. I have examined all these components now, and I've made my decision about what I'm going to replace, and so on and so forth. The first thing is, this is the shaft that came out of the gearbox. It was fine, it wasn't bent, but I noticed that in fact it was worn here. And this is something that had been in place for a long time, because I'd actually machined up the gear that goes there. You can see that's the surface there, but I'd actually extended this bush a little bit to assist in driving the gear up the shaft a little bit further and still having the right end float on it. Now, I'll come back to this gear in a moment, but essentially I've decided to replace this shaft with another shaft which is the correct length. And I know that because I've compared that to the original shaft I took out of the gearbox, which was the bent one. So that's the main shaft sorted out. Now this is the first gear on the main shaft, and apart from the modification it's had with the bushes, the key reason I've decided to replace this is because these corners, these dogs are they've seen a lot of action and they're rounded off. And indeed, if I take the gear that meshes with this, it isn't much, it doesn't take a lot to get to take these apart before they want to press apart. So when you have a curved surface on there and you have another curved surface on there, eventually you get to the point where these things are going to want to push apart, and the only thing that will keep them in place is the selector fork. And it's not designed to take those loads, it's designed to move the gear, and then the gears are meant to stay engaged. So these gears, first gear and the sliding gear in the main shaft, are going to go. One of the other elements of wear which I discovered is this is the gear here that goes onto the sleeve gear. Right, let me just explain one of the elements of wear which I found on this gear, where these dogs here engage into the sleeve gear. This looks like this is undoubtedly an early evolution of the gear, in that every second dog is recessed, all the better to allow this to rotate and engage with that. But the problem is that the first set of these dogs are now well below the surface. There's wear, so this has got to go a little bit further before it engages with anything. And of course on the other side these dogs are all worn, so this is definitely going to go along with this mating gear here. Let me just show you the difference between this gear here, the original, and the latest one I'm going to use. As you can see, a lot of these dogs have been removed, and this is a later version which allowed for cleaner engagement with the sleeve gear, so that goes in there nicely. And as you can see, these dogs here, they've seen a bit of use, but they're just showing a bit of light at the moment rather than being roundly sort of battered and damaged. So that's the set of components which I'm planning to use. Actually, this is the old sleeve gear. In fact, the other one here which I'm going to use is this one, and I know that because I put some tape on it so I didn't get confused. But anyway, there's so many of these old components. The other thing I'm planning to do is I'm making do with components that have seen some action. And one of the things we all have to do, it would be very easy to just say, okay, scrap the gearbox and replace everything. Okay, you could do that, there's parts available, but the challenge is to look at all this stuff with sensible pass and fail criteria and make a decision about what you can live with and what you cannot live with. And I have decided that this shaft and these gears, or this one is the good one, but these two definitely I'm not going to live with. But the lay shaft, on the other hand, that has proved to be in very good shape. The sliding dogs are not rounded, and all in all this is going to go back in pretty well as it came out. All I have to do is shim it up and fit it all, and that's about it really. Some of you might disagree with my decisions on what is passable or what is acceptable, but for all of that, I've made my decision. I've managed to procure some used parts. I'm happy about that, because stuff that is old and used, someone else has taken the risk of it being badly heat treated and it's full of cracks or about to crack. So all in all, I'm quite happy with the way this is going to go together, and the next video in fact will be all about me putting this together, and I hope to use this little camera on a wire to great effect when I'm looking at the lay shaft, because it will be interesting to see what sort of mesh I get on this and whether or not I need to shim the main shaft or the lay shaft up to get the required engagement on the dogs. So there will be wear all over the place on this. It's a very mature gearbox, and it needs to be carefully assessed so that when it goes together it's going to be comfortable. And of course, having been disturbed, it'll have to be run in for a little while, but all of that is achievable. And Anyway, it won't be long before I'm fully run in with the 5-speed gearbox, and I've high hopes for the life of that. Right, this is the end of video 9. I'm going to stop now. I've done my assessment on all these bits and pieces. As far as I'm concerned, I have a nice set of parts which I can put together, and the next video will be all about what I need to shim up, what I need to measure, what I need to confirm, given the fact that in effect this is a mature set of parts, and I imagine there are not many people out there with 4 speeds which are full of brand new parts. So some of you might find it of interest to see what bits and pieces I'm making a decision on and how I decide to shim things. Anyway, until that time, thank you for bearing with me and persevering, and I'll be producing another video as soon as I can, because I'm very eager to get this job finished, because I've got other projects which I need to get onto.